First thing in line over here is your total hardness. This is your calcium. When it comes to your calcium, everything your spa and pool is made out of, from the surface of the pool to the tile to the grout to the coping to the deck, has calcium in it. Your water by nature is a calcium eater. If the calcium level in this pool gets below that 250, the minimum for this, and stays below that level for too long, you're going to start to notice what they call etching. It's going to be a spot in the pool, surface of it, that's lighter in color than the rest of the pool. That is irreversible. Hopefully you notice it before that, and you add calcium to the pool to raise that calcium level. If you do, calcium flakes is what you're looking for. It's going to look like white paint chips. Take that, add a pound or two to a bucket, fill that bucket with water, stir it up with something other than your hand because calcium gets hot, pour it into the pool.
So that's if it ever goes below 250?
If it ever gets below that 250, or you test it and it is below that 250, you're going to want to add calcium. The reason I'm telling you to add it a pound or two at a time, wait a week, and then test it again to see if you add more, so that way you're not adding too much at one time and getting it up too high. The highest you want it's at a 500. If it gets above that 500, the only way to lower it down is by draining water off the pool. The other part of this is if it gets above that 500, stays above that 500, you're going to start to notice what they call calcium buildup. It's going to look like a white chalky buildup. 9 times out of 10 you'll notice it on the tile line first. However, you may notice it on the surface of the pool. If you do, in that white box is a pumice stone. For the love of your pool, wet it first. Then scrub wherever that calcium buildup is, and it will come right off. The reason I say that, 3 weeks ago we had a customer who forgot it. Now she's got scratches on her tile line. Next thing in line is your total chlorine. When it comes to your total chlorine, the lower, the better. The darker green it is, the more bacteria is in this water. So after you add tabs to your system, and your system, or your pool rather, uses up the chlorine it needs, you have leftover chlorine just floating around in the pool. That is going to confine itself to any particles or bacteria that's in this water and form what they call bromines, which when you test it, if it's high, like I said, the darker color it is there, the more bacteria is in this water. You'll never need to know how to raise it. It will raise on its own. You just need to know how to lower it. If it's too high and you need to lower it, all you have to do, last person out of the pool at the end of the day or before y'all go to bed, somebody come out here, throw a pound or two of shock into a bucket. Fill it with water, stir it up, pour it into the pool. By the time you come out here the next morning, if you were to test it again, it should be back down to 0 or at least to the 1, which is acceptable range for that. Next thing in line is your free chlorine. When it comes to your free chlorine, what it's doing is helping the clarity of your water, helping it keep it from wanting to turn cloudy and green on you. When it comes to the free chlorine, the bottle's going to tell you you want it between that 1 and that 5. But because you have that mineral cartridge, you can actually run it as low as a 0.5. So even lower than the 1 and what the bottle's telling you. When it comes to this is pure preference. So as you're testing the chemicals in the water and swimming in it, you're going to get to know where you want this free chlorine level to be between that 0.5 and that 5. I will tell you now, if you try to run that free chlorine level in this pool at a 0.5 or a 1, within the next few weeks, the closer we start getting into summer, especially during the summertime, this pool is definitely going to want to turn cloudy and green on you. At that point, you're going to want to run it more like a 3, although you can go up as high as a 5. If you're going to have a pool party with 20 people in it, I recommend the 5. During the fall and winter months is when it's more appropriate to run it at the 0.5 to the 1 range. If this free chlorine level is too low and you need to raise it, add chlorine tabs to the system. If this free chlorine level gets too high and you need to lower it, you can do two things. One, take all the tabs out of the system, which is what I recommend. Let it run without tabs in it. The longer you let it run without tabs in it, the further that free chlorine level is going to come down. Or two, you can just reach over there to that dial and dial it down to the 1. Next thing in line is your pH. This is the most important chemical in the pool. Reason being is for 3 reasons. First off, you want this pH to always be between that 7.2 and 7.8 range. If this pH level is below that 7.2, now your pool water is too acidic. If it's too high above that 7.8, now your pool water is too corrosive. Either way, it's bad for your pool surface and will cause it to start going bad way quicker than it should. Number 2, it's bad for you as the swimmer. Most people, when they go swimming and come out, they complain about their eyes irritating and burning. They think it's the high chlorine that's causing it. It's the high pH. And the third reason for this being within those ranges, inside the center of that heater is a chunk of copper, what we call the heat exchanger. If this pH level is not consistently between those ranges, it will eventually cause that piece of copper to start corroding, warping, rusting, eventually leaking. If it comes to that and it starts leaking and you submit that warranty claim for us to come check it out, before we touch that, we're coming to the pool to check this pH level. If it's between those ranges and you're still under warranty, the replacement or the repair of the heater will come out of our pocket. If we come out and test it and it's not within those ranges, now the repair or the replacement is coming out of your pocket. What I recommend to all people, I don't care if you're both professional chemists, take a sample of your pool water to a pool store or a place that tests samples of water. Reason being is because every one of these places is going to give you a print up of what the chemicals levels were in your water. Bring that home, keep track of it, so that way worst case scenario happens, it starts leaking, you have that as proof to prove that you've consistently had it within range.
How often should we take it?
Once a week or once every other week, just to give you a little breathing room there. If this pH level is too low and you need to raise it, baking soda. If it gets too high and you need to, if it gets too low and you need to raise it, baking soda. If it gets too high and you need to lower it, muriatic acid. Next thing in line is your alkalinity. You want this to be between an 80 and a 120 at all times. The only thing it's helping in conjunction with is your free chlorine and the clarity of the water. If this alkalinity level gets too low and you need to raise it, just like the pH, baking soda. If this alkalinity level gets too high and you need to lower it, just like the pH, muriatic acid. This pH and alkalinity is going to be a week-to-week game. One week you will be adding baking soda to bring both of them up. The next week you'll be adding that muriatic acid to bring both of them down.
And I'm assuming you get the baking soda in bulk at the pool store, yes. Just like the massive.
You can get it at Lowe's, Walmart, Home Depot as well.
Okay.
And if it doesn't say anything about a pool on it or have a pool symbol, it's probably not the one you need.
Okay.
Basically, what I like to tell people is not the kind you're cooking with.
Got it.
Last thing in line, bottle says cyanuric acid. Everybody's going to say stabilizer, so that way they don't confuse you with muriatic acid. So when it comes to the stabilizer, you want it to be between a 30 and a 50. For the first 60 days, when you're testing the chemicals of this water and looking at this test strip, ignore this reading. The reason I tell you to do that is because for the first 60 days, when you're testing with these test strips, if and when you get a high pH reading, by the time you get down here to see where the stabilizer at, it's going to give you what we call a false reading and tell you it's a lot higher than it really is. That's why we tell you to ignore it for the first 60 days. Another part of this, we don't recommend adding any stabilizer to the pool to raise it to get it between those that 30 and the 50 range. The reason we tell you not to add any is because each one of those tabs that are in that system right now has a little bit of the stabilizer in it. So you're already naturally getting it, and very slowly, which is the way we want you to get it. After that 60 days, if you test it, start paying attention to it, and you're between that 30 and that 50 range, take every single tab you have in that system out and switch to what they call straight chlorine tabs. Same as what you got in there now, they just don't have any of the stabilizer in it. So that way when you get to that 30 and 50 range and you make that switch, you don't have to worry about that stabilizer level getting up higher than it should. Because just like the calcium level, if that gets too high, the only way to lower it is by draining water out of the pool.
And then if it gets too low, put the tablets back in that have it? Or it won't?
It won't get too low.
Okay.
Though it's very hard to lower that cyanic acid. So obviously, like I said, the higher it is, the more water you got to drain out. The other part of this is if it gets basically to that 100 or higher, this pool is going to be in what they call chemical lock at that point. Meaning you're going to be able to throw everything that you want to at this pool and nothing's going to have an effect. The only way it's going to fix itself is the moment you drain water out. Yep. Most of the time, so there's a big debate about this, that there's no real way to lower it except for by draining water out. The big part of that debate comes from how much water you're having to drain out. So some people are going to tell you you're going to have to drain all of it out. Some people will say halfway. You just got to kind of play with it when it gets to that point, which is why we tell you to have a good control over this as much as possible. Once you get it between that range, make that switch so that way you don't have to worry about any of those extra issues. What I'm going to do now is take these test strips. I'm going to take one of them out, test the pool water, so that way we can kind of run through it one more time, so that way y'all are a little more comfortable with it.
Okay.
I'm